Alright, I figured I hadn't shot a video in a minute, so here you go. This print just finished. I would have shown it to you while it was printing, but I've started putting my SD card in the printer to run the prints. So I saved the G-code on the SD card and then plug the SD card into the printer, and that gives me my computer back. So anyway, we're picking up here at the end, and then I'll run one off the computer and shoot a little bit of video. But before I remove these from the bed, I just thought this was really neat. It's kind of hard to see the shapes themselves from this angle, but all of this stuff in between these two parts is just the pattern that the plastic happened to make as the nozzle head was moving from piece to piece, each layer. So you know, it does a layer and then it zooms over here, it does a layer and it zooms over there, and it just, as it just so happened, the angles worked out to make these bridge patterns, which was pretty neat, I thought. So what I usually do for this is just try to get, this is a little piece of plastic that came with a soldering kit that I bought. I just try to get it underneath the raft. I started printing rafts a little while ago. I wasn't for a while because there seems to be kind of general, I don't know, distaste for them on the internet community stuff, but man, they work really well. And I get the thing about, you know, you could just level your bed, you don't have to print a raft, but you could just print a raft and then you don't have to level your bed. And I like that a lot better. So they don't take that long anyway. You can print them really fast. So it didn't really work that time the way that I like it to. It would be better if I had broken the raft free from the ABS plastic that's on the bed, but that's okay. It just means I'll put more ABS acetone slurry down to remake it. So I guess I'll break that apart, but let's kind of see how these do. Okay, yeah, it worked pretty well. It's basically what they are supposed to look like. So this is kind of something I was thinking about doing for as a test design towards something like a lantern. So maybe bigger, or maybe more of them, smaller and clustered. I'm not really sure, but it's something kind of like that. So this is moderately translucent. You can kind of get the idea here. Yeah, there you go. So if you get light inside of there, it does shine out pretty good, which is, I think, pretty cool. Let's see, does it work from the bottom? Nope. So the bottom is solid, and just the first 10 millimeters on the bottom are solid. So it's up to about like here. It's just completely filled, and then the rest of it is hollow all the way in, and it's got kind of curved straight edges, if you will, along it, and then the actual faces are made of triangles because, well, frankly, because that's what SketchUp thinks in, and also because it just gives it a little more texture. I can do round paths, but then I wouldn't be able to give it, you know, these edges, so therefore I wouldn't be able to twist it at all, and I wanted to do one with a little bit of a twist. Most of what I've been making these days has been nozzles, which I really won't show you that closely, but they're hard to see anyway. But this is one printed in that same transparent plastic. I was just trying to see if the transparent plastic would hold up in a nice solid fill, and it does pretty well. But unfortunately this print did not finish. This is printed with a layer height of 0.06 millimeters. Yeah, 0.06 millimeters. So when the part is complete, like this one is, it's like 621 layers now, I think, was my latest. So it takes about 4 hours for this to go. And this one, who is just not quite tall enough, as you can see. He's missing the top part where it tapers and has a little bit of connection to screw into something. So it cannot connect to anything, and therefore this guy is useless. But he was doing well. The printer tried. This hasn't really been cleaned at all. I just printed it and popped it off the bed and cut off the raft. But didn't quite finish. I think what happened is that when the sun starts to come up in the morning, because a lot of times I leave these printing overnight, the humidity spikes, and it can sometimes cause the filament strand to crack or break on its way into the extruder. And I'm hoping that my new addition to the printer will help with that, though. I went ahead and cleaned one up here so we can have a better look at it. Kind of something like that, where it's got a lot of light in there. It's really hard to see on camera, sorry. But alrighty, I'm getting a print started here, and I've actually already kind of remade my bed, because I didn't think to record this part, but just to show you my new toy. This is a heat gun that my buddy Andy from work let me borrow, and it is fantastic. Heats up the bed really fast, it gets the surface of the plastic really hot, and lets me give it a final smoothing. So anyway, now I'm starting a print. It should only take a couple of minutes here to heat up. This is going to be the same thing that I made last time. This guy. The difference is going to be more layers. He's going to have a layer height of 0.06, which is my smallest possible layer height. And this one has a layer height of 0.1. So quite a bit finer. For reference, the nozzle I showed earlier, this has a layer height of 0.06, and it's very fine. Well, I think it is. So you can see the vertical lines is again because this is a a SketchUp model that's printed out, and so I used, I think this is a 24-sided circle, maybe 24 or 36, I can't remember. And you can kind of see them there. So those are intentional. I could use more lines if I wanted, but I think the tool was able to better, or is able to better navigate a circle that has fewer lines. I wanted to show you my spool softener in action here. So the wire filament is coming from a spool over here. It's going to spin like this, and the filament comes out, and it goes to here, and this is like an axle mount. It's got a bolt stuck through each side, so one coming this way, one coming that way. You get it. And so the wheel has edges to keep the filament contained inside of it, and it rolls back and forth. And I just drew on two of the sides with a marker so that I can tell when he's spinning and when he's not, which is nice because then I can tell from across the room whether or not the filament's moving. And I finally replaced my Z-axis threaded rods, and they sell them by the meter, the metric sizes, and I only needed 21 centimeters, so I went ahead and bought a 1 meter length and just cut it in half, figuring that I would then shorten them. But instead, I put these pieces of tape on there to keep from poking my eyeball out, and then I put this through it to be doubly sure that I wouldn't poke my eye out. And I like it because it moves. We'll see if we get a click here. But every time it goes up a layer, there you go, it clicks over, and again, like you can see from across the room what's going on. and I can't think of any reason it'll have a negative effect as long as I don't run into them. Anyway, that's what's going on. Let's check on the part one more time. Alright, so it's just about print time here, so I'm gonna make sure the extruder is loaded. Because as it heats up, plastic drips out the nozzle, which means that when it starts there won't be any plastic in the nozzle, and it doesn't have any kind of sensor that would tell it that. So you want to make sure you keep it primed. And a lot of times I actually hit it with a little bit of the lithium grease at this point, but I don't know where my little piece of paper towel is, so maybe we'll go without this time. Oh, I stuck right to it. Okay. Alright. And we're off and running. Hands off. Right now it's printing the first layer, which is going to be the first raft layer. So it's printing lines nice and far spaced apart, and they are both taller and thicker than usual, and I've turned up the flow rate so that it's a pretty heavy line pour out. And with the material I'm using right now, I've got the nozzle set very hot. It's set at 254 degrees. Oh my gosh, you're just gonna blow the plastic? Yeah, I know. I'm going for transparency. So the idea here is that it's hot enough that, yes, when the filament comes out of the die, you know, the nozzle opening there, it probably will burst a little bit, especially because it's kind of humid. Well, it's really humid, and there's some water absorbed or dissolved into the ABS itself. So you will get some amount of, you know, bubbles forming and popping. But it's also hot enough that when you come back over a spot that's had all that popping, first of all, when it was doing that popping, it was so hot that all the water left the plastic. That's why it was popping. And when the nozzle tip comes back over that rough surface and injects more plastic onto it, again at 255 degrees, it smooths the surface beneath it and bursts the surface that it's depositing. And then when it comes back again, it smooths the surface beneath it, you get it. So that actually seems to work okay. This guy here, I'm pretty sure his most transparent spots, which again are not showing up very well on the camera, but I'm pretty sure his most transparent spots are where it was the hottest. So I actually had him started at a lower temp of, I think, 248, and I turned it up because I thought it was too opaque down at the bottom. So we're on the, I guess, third layer of the raft. The widely spaced layers going in this direction got topped by a closely spaced layer going in this direction, and I have the flow set pretty high here. It's at like 130%. And now we're on the third layer. So the second layer went this way, and now the third layer is going that way again. And by this point, having injected a lot of plastic at a very high temperature on top of those widely spaced ones, it has now kind of leveled itself. So my bed didn't need to be leveled because the nozzle is smoothing this surface as it goes. And my bed is close to level, you know. I did level it, but that was, I don't know, 5 days ago, and I've done a lot of prints since then. And in fact, I moved the printer from one room to another since then and did not change the screws at all. The set screws that hold the bed down. And think I'm on the last layer of my raft, and at this point it's getting really smooth. You can even see the difference in the color because the surface is getting a kind of glassy, or at least glassier smoothness, shininess. And that's basically what we're going for, because as what I'm expecting here is that the translucence property of the plastic is really probably not related to the printing so much as to the surfaces. So if you print at a low nozzle temperature, or you don't have a high flow, then you end up with a sculpture of string instead of a solid wall like you see in this part. So that's all one solid wall instead of pieces of string wrapped and tied together. So if you have a sculpture of string, there's like a bajillion surfaces in there, so each one of them is going to deflect and reflect and refract light away from it, and you're never going to get any real translucence through it, or any real transmittance. But if you have only two edges, you know, an outside edge on this side and an outside edge on the other side, then, and each one of those is relatively smooth, you should get pretty good transmission. Anyway, that's the idea. And Bandit's being very patient, so I guess I'm gonna go take him out. But we'll try to catch the end of this print and let you see how it's going. Oh. Alright, so this time it's gonna have a much thinner bottom, not a full centimeter. I think I put it to like 3 millimeters. So that's what it's making right now, and as you can see, it's on the spiralized setting, but it's doing a fill for the bottom layer, and it's just doing a spiral pattern in and then a spiral pattern back out. And it doesn't completely space fill. It's got holes in it as best as I can tell, but that's not bugging me. Anyway, to the dog. Alright, so just checking in here. It's now in the proper spiralized portion of its printing. So it's doing just one continuous path with a consistent and slow Z-rays throughout its lap. And looks like it's going okay. We'll check in again when it's done. So this is yesterday evening's last print. I did another copy of that same little guy, and then these are actually just test prints basically, and they went very well, the tests. So what was the test for? Well, for their big brother. So I'm shooting this video because I'm afraid to break this, pulling it off the bed. I want to prove that it's real. So this guy is pretty tall. Just moving forward. This is the largest piece I've printed so far. It took about 11 or 12 hours. It finished while I was at work today, actually. But you can see the surfaces a lot better on this scale. So the previous print is actually the top of this. So this in my hand here is congruent to the top portion here, the top 1/5 actually. And then the remainder of it, so the bottom 4/5 is actually a copy of this that has been scaled up by 1/5 5 times. So the scale times 1.2 to the 5th power. Yeah. And it gives you this. So let's try and break it off of the bed without breaking it. Alright. This is a little nerve-wracking for me, but I think it's gonna work. He actually tore off of there pretty well, and his edges went well. You can see the triangles reflecting the light there, which is what's supposed to be there. And I don't have my flashlight with me, but you can pretty easily tell that this one is translucent. You know, with the light behind it, you can see that the bottom few millimeters, I think either 10 or 15, I can't remember, are filled, and then the rest of it is hollow, hollow through the center. So the hole is too small. There is a hole there, I just can't